I still remember the day I signed my first art licensing contract. It didn't quite happen the way you might expect, but here's how it worked. I wanted to land my first art licensing contract so bad. I had been studying up about art licensing obsessively since the moment I'd heard about it 2 years ago, and I just couldn't get enough information. I devoured everything I could find on the topic. I had been working every spare minute that I had, which wasn't a lot for a stay-at-home mom, to work towards this goal of getting my first art licensing deal. So I had, at the time, my youngest was 2, and I had an 8-year-old and I think 13-year-old. And we were busy, we were also homeschooling, but I was just dying to get this going. And so what that looked like for me was I was usually working on creating art, building my portfolio. I was working on it early in the morning hours before my family was awake. I was working on it during nap time, and I was working on it late into the night after my kids went to bed. I honestly was probably overworking myself a little too much, but I did get a lot done in a short amount of time. The thing about art licensing is it tends to be attached to the pattern design world most of the time, I feel like. And so when I heard about art licensing, I kind of took a pause on painting for a little while, and I started designing patterns because I thought, oh, if I want to get licensed, I probably need to license into fabrics and wallpapers and all that. And while that is true, that there's a big industry for those things, there's a big industry for licensing fine art as well, which is what I have since learned. But at the time, I started learning about pattern design, and it actually was super fun. And if you are interested in learning how to design patterns, it's a great thing to add to your licensing portfolio, but it's not required, absolutely not. But I had started designing patterns, and I had designed a couple of collections early on. And when I had finished designing a couple of collections and tweaking them, I thought, okay, I have 2 collections in my portfolio. I felt like that was the bare minimum I should have when pitching to companies who needed patterns. I began searching for any and all fabric companies that had any sort of reliable contact information that I could find on the internet. And I came across a small fabric company that had an actual submission for new artists. And so I went ahead and contacted that company, sent them my portfolio, and then waited. I was so excited because the art director got back to me and we started talking back and forth, and she gave me a little more details about what was involved with their contract, and I was starting to get my hopes up. I was thinking, okay, I think this might be it. This might be my first yes. I think I had actually just sent her my second collection that I had finished after being in contact with her, and so I sent that off to her, really feeling hopeful. And then when she got back to me, she basically said, this isn't really a good fit. She was super nice about it. I was crushed. I think I even cried a little bit to my husband because I really, really wanted that licensing deal so bad. I wasn't even sure if it was gonna make me money, but it was just the fact that if I had gotten that first art licensing deal, it was like validation for myself that I was able to get licensed. So I had so much hope riding on this, and when I got that real clear no, what I thought was a real clear no, I was pretty crushed. And so I wrote the art director back and I said, I really appreciate your feedback, and maybe I'll contact you again in the future once I've created a new collection that include these qualities that you're looking for. And then I sent it off and I just thought, okay, that's done, And then I got a response from her and she said, oh no, you misunderstood me. I would like you to keep tweaking this collection and send it back to me. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay. So I went back to work on that collection. I made different tweaks and color changes and designed a few new patterns. And then I sent that off to her, and we had a few more back and forths. She gave a little more input on some of the patterns and what she would like to see. And in the end, she was happy with the collection and she sent me a contract. I was ecstatic because that first contract told me that I could do it. That told me that I could get my work licensed. With enough hard work, my art was good enough. And it didn't require perfection. It basically required not giving up. So I want you to keep this in mind. When you start pitching your artwork, do not give up. Because if you do, you might miss an opportunity that might be literally right around the corner. To be honest, pitching your artwork to companies is hard. You have to put your heart on the line. You create a beautiful body of work and then you send it out to the world hoping that they will basically accept it and say, yes, this is what we want. And the fact is, a lot of the time it's not what art directors are wanting. But so much of the time it doesn't have to do with your skill or your art specifically, it just has to do with the type of work that fits their needs at the time. So, when you start pitching your artwork, don't give up when you get no's. Don't give up and feel like your work is not good enough, because 99% of the time that's not the case. It's just more about timing. And sometimes you may need a little more skill and a little more practice, and you may need to develop your art and your portfolio a little more, but that's what you keep doing anyway. That's the cool thing about pitching your work, is you don't have to wait till your portfolio is perfect, because let's be honest, I don't know if it ever reaches that level, because your work is always changing and evolving over time anyway. So while you're building your portfolio, let's see if I can say that right, your portfolio, don't wait until it's perfect. Just start pitching. And then when you get those no's, don't give up. Just keep going, because I promise you it will pay off. If you'd like to receive weekly tips about art licensing, then I highly recommend signing up for my newsletter, because it's full of great and beautiful information that I put together just for you. And then be sure to watch the next video in this series that I'll be releasing next week, because I'll be walking through my framework for getting your first art licensing deal.